very lucky to have with us tonight Eliav Benjamin. Good evening, Eliav from Israel. How's it going?
Good evening, Shavua Tov, everybody. Pleasure to be with you.
Right, it's wonderful to have you here. You know, you're the head of the Middle East Bureau in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and therefore in a wonderful position to talk to us about all the amazing changes that are happening in Israel. But first of all, a little bit about you, Eliav, if we could begin with this. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up there, and what is the bureau within the ministry? Because I don't really understand the difference. So that would really help me.
Okay, so first of all, it really is, I mean, something special to be amongst some family as well in this context, even if it is through Zoom. And perhaps in this context, I would like to maybe dedicate the next I don't know, few minutes that we have together to my cousin Avigail Bat Ruth Shosha, wishing her a real refuah shlema and a speedy recovery, please God.
Amen.
From all of us. So I guess that I'm in the ministry because of my wife, basically. I don't know if my parents even remember this, but my wife studied Chinese studies and Far Eastern studies way back when, and took me for an adventure just after we got married for a year in Taiwan. And during that year, I worked for the Israeli mission in Taipei. And we both lived and worked in the Jewish community, a very, very small one at the time. I think even smaller now, actually. And we need to understand, Taiwan is a country with whom we don't have a formal embassy or consulate because of the relations with China, but that's where I worked, and we have a mission there as well. And then after that, came back to Israel, and then I started my studies in the Middle East and Islam. My mother said I should, if I'm going to do that, maybe I should learn to be a plumber as well, so at least I have a profession in addition to that. I stuck with diplomacy, turned that into a profession some way or another. And I've now been in the ministry for nearly 20 years. I think in about 10 days, actually, I'm celebrating 20 years in the ministry, a time which has flown by in many ways. And I spent 4 years in China. We spent 4 years in China with a family as Deputy Consul General in Shanghai. Most of my work there was business oriented, basically business development for Israeli companies seeking opportunities and making things boom between the countries. And then later on moved on more onto a policy type of work, both in Israel and then afterwards in Washington, D.C., where we spent 4 years. Mm-hmm. Coming back to Israel, I continued with that. And for the past, nearly 4.5 years, I worked in the Director General's office of the ministry, where I'd worked also before as a policy advisor, but now doing other things in the ministry, which included both advising to the Director General or Director Generals, I should say, because there are a few who come and go. Mm. The change is quite swift in our system.
Right.
And both working, kind of integrating the ministry's work internally and externally with other ministries in the Israeli system and other government agencies. But a big chunk of the work has also been working with what we call special countries, or countries with whom we don't have formal relations with. And purposely, this is being very tightly kept within the Director General's Bureau, both to cut the red tape and the bureaucracy, but also to keep things very tight amongst a few who are in the know of what's going on and what we want to actually do and to achieve. So that's what I've been doing for basically the most part of the past just over 4 years or so. And
right.
Just recently, I've basically taken a big chunk of my portfolio to a new position in the ministry as the head of the Middle East Bureau, which traditionally has been dealing with our embassies and relations with Jordan and Egypt and with the Palestinians. But now a big part of it, of course, is shifting to other areas as well, to the Gulf, to North Africa, and hopefully also developing further the relations with Jordan, with Egypt, and as we say in our language, inshallah, maybe also with the Palestinians.
Right, absolutely. Well, look, it's an incredible position you have, and your experience is amazing in terms of its breadth, in terms of both economic and policy and all those regions. It makes a massive difference. And the most exciting thing that we're all watching has been this developing with the relations with more and more countries from the Arab League. I remember growing up, Egypt 79 and Jordan 94, those relations. But now to have four, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco all in the same year is incredible. Could you tell us the background of how this came to be? Obviously, there was a lot going on in back channels, no doubt, for years. But can you tell us the last few years, like what were the key steps along the way that led to that, to start with?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would actually start just by mentioning that, I mean, the foreign ministry has been dealing with this for over 20 years,
Right.
even 25 years or so, since the beginning of not the beginning, but since the Oslo Accords. Foreign minister at the time called one of my colleagues who's still working with me, called him aside. He said, okay, start developing the relations with other countries in the region.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it basically started. And we've been kind of going on and off with this with different countries in different ways over the years, but more extensively over the past, I would say, 3 years or so. Pushing forward full steam ahead with the countries that we're all talking about now and with some of the others as well. And at the end of the day, I said it in previous forums, kind of all the stars kind of aligned for different reasons now, about 3.5 months ago. Nobody or few people would have believed that we would be where we are now up to about 3.5 months ago.
Right.
And we're talking, when I'm saying stars aligned, so it's issues of, I would say, Palestinian fatigue, if you want, a non-politically correct approach or statement to say, but this is something which is felt by everybody. The US administration, which for the past 4 years has been pushing for this in different ways. The Israeli government that has been pushing for this more extensively over recent years. The countries that we're talking about, they're understanding the interest of having real relations with Israel. It's the Iran issue, which we all see eye to eye in. It's when I say the interest from these countries, so UAE probably the first and foremost amongst them, but also Bahrain as well, with understanding the economic benefits of working with Israel. I mentioned the Palestinian fatigue in a way, which also plays into it, which, countries are basically have had enough of being hijacked and held hostage by the Palestinian issue, and that they're missing out on the relations with Israel, not just because of the relations and the economic benefits and the cultural benefits and tourism and everything else, but also when it comes to America.
But what actually changed in that context, though? Because there was no dramatic change in the relationship with the Palestinians with Israel.
So I think it came to some kind of a critical mass over the past 2 years. Some of our team in the ministry have put a lot of emphasis on what we call public diplomacy. You can look up on those of you who follow Twitter, for instance, Israel and the Gulf. So we set an account and very, very active on engaging with Gulf countries and Gulf people. And we were very, very careful of steering away from what we call the hardcore issues, Iran, Palestinians, conflicts, or anything like that, but really beginning a conversation with people in the region, talking about Israeli developments in the high-tech sector, agriculture, congratulating them on their first astronaut, congratulating them on their Nobel laureate on, I think it was on literature, if I'm not mistaken. Congratulating each other on Happy New Year's, Independence Days, beginning a conversation. And this also helped them to feel that they have a strong enough support, if you want, from the ground to have the courage to move forward. And then this goes hand in hand on the political discussions that we've been holding with them over a number of years now, meeting with senior officials from their foreign ministry, from the cabinet, from the leadership.
Right. Has that been happening over Zoom, or Israelis diplomats
No.
to UAE?
This is pre-Zoom.
Right.
This started pre-Zoom. Zoom had an effect. On the one hand, making it difficult to have the person-to-person meetings, which we did still have, but it was difficult. But we have other technologies that Zoom unfortunately don't enable, which is really encrypted video conversations that we're able to have with some of them. On the one hand, then there's the economic side, and really more and more Israeli companies and Emirati companies coming together. And one of the other stars that came that aligned, if you want, is actually Corona, what we call COVID-19, which we also actually as an opportunity, both again on the economic side, but also really finding joint cures and ways to deal with coronavirus. One of the things that I started about 6 or maybe 9 months ago already is connections between Israeli and Emirati companies dealing with COVID issues, with detection, with prevention, and so on. And this is and when we talk about Emirati companies and companies in the region in general, we need to understand that this is very different than what goes on in the UK and Israel. The line between politics or a politician and a businessman, in the very least, is very blurred. Okay? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, economic self-interest is a huge motivator here, but it's amazing that those private relations were begun so early and sensibly to enable this to happen. That makes a lot of sense. So when did so with the UAE and Bahrain, that was quite soon together. Was it expected that Sudan and Morocco would come so soon after? Were other countries looking to see how that played out, or was it something separate?
So look, Raphael, I mean, we've been in touch. We are in touch with, I'd say, most countries in the region, in the Gulf and in North Africa. Some of them are more advanced with relations, some of them are less so. I think the Gulf is, as a region, we are more kind of ahead of the game with our relations and more extensive years. But at the end of the day, it's also, a lot of it is about politics. A lot of it is about I don't know whether the word courage is the word, but yes, it is also an issue of courage, of leadership, of taking the steps. And there is also the issue of, what's in it for me? Not on a personal level necessarily, more on a political level and on a national level. Countries want to see, okay, what do they get out of these relations with Israel? It's not necessary vis-a-vis Israel, by the way. It has never been, just to be clear, it's never been a precondition on the table, okay, of what you get out of it. But there are other players and other issues and other interests that these countries have with them. With Sudan, we've been having relationships over a number of years. A big part of it was the issue of terrorism that we saw starting to come out from there through Iran earlier on towards Hamas. This fortunately stopped already a few years ago. Then we have the story of some people called the economic asylum seekers, or whatever we want to call them, of the Sudanese who are in Israel. And how do we repatriate them, or don't we repatriate them? How do we deal with that? With Morocco, we've had relations, forever with Israeli tourists going out. I'm talking about 50,000 tourists here going out there, cultural groups going out there for various events. And but we had an office in a representative.
But would you say, I know it's North Africa, but would you say Morocco and Sudan are reacting to what happened with UAE and Bahrain? Was that the trigger? Was that they saw that it was acceptable to do it? There wasn't kickback. Was that the issue, or it was literally coincidence that it was soon after? Or
There are no coincidences here.
Right.
It's
Well,
it's
Rabbi,
absolute.
I just thought I'd ask.
No. There are no coincidences here. Look. I think most countries in the region are basically sitting on the line or sitting on the fence,
Hmm.
and kind of contemplating when to jump onto the
Right,
wagon.
and they're looking for the political issues their own place. And I know you have lots of personal experience with this. I'd love to hear some stories of personal connections. I mean, I know because I saw some videos of you talked about some, but your personal involvement in this would be very interesting for us to hear.
So, well, I mean, I've been traveling back and forth for for a number of years now, to the region. Well, I won't go into names of which countries and how often or whatever, but
Okay.
got some good relations there. One of the questions that I've always had to kind of ask myself, and when I go there, it hasn't always been on my formal diplomatic passport. And
Right.
thank you, Mummy and Daddy, for bringing me to life when I was in England. So I have a British one as well, which allows for some free travels in all kinds of places. One of the questions was, okay, do I take my tefillin with me to some of these places? Which is okay, because not everybody there knows who I am and who I am, which is always an issue. Coming to meet, for instance, the person who used to be their ambassador in the US, and now is still very close to the foreign ministry there, Ambassador Nunu, who's phenomenal, Huda, who's a great friend. She's a member of the Jewish community there. She used to be of the Shura, of more or less the parliament, if you want, not exactly, but the parliament.
This is in Bahrain or UAE? Sorry.
This is Bahrain. This is Bahrain.
Right.
There is a very small Jewish community there, believe it or not, for those of you who aren't aware of it, about 39 Jews. I mean, families who originate. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are even related to us, and to me at least in some way.
And she told you she was Jewish, or you knew that, or?
No, I knew she's very outspoken about it.
Right.
And there's a very small Jewish. There's a shul there, which I haven't yet visited actually, because for sensitivity reasons. But only recently, by the way, Jared Kushner brought a Sefer Torah to the shul.
Wow.
When I met her, when was it, about 9 months ago or so in Bahrain, she said, "Look, we'd really be happy. We're renovating the shul now. If you can find a way of bringing some Jewish artifacts to the shul, a parochet, some for a Sefer Torah, or something like that, that would be great." And they're also building now what they call kind of an Abrahamic center for the three monotheistic religions in a different part of Bahrain, because this particular shul is an old part in a Shiite area, which is not very accessible, definitely not on Shabbat for shul goers. And by the way, they seem to be quite adamant about keeping Chabad out of Bahrain. They're seeing what's going on in
UAE.
in the UAE, like the old Jewish story, one Jew, two shuls. But here it's already I think 3 communities with 2 Chabads, and one not.
Yeah. 1 Jew, 2 shuls, 3 Chabad houses. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a different issue. And here we're actually, as a government, also very, very careful of kind of how we address them, who we address, and this is also a very big.
And you said it was her first time in Israel, just when she landed. What was that? Like a few weeks ago?
About a month ago, she came with the Prime Minister, and this was her first time in Israel. She has family in Israel.
How old is she? I'm fucking. I mean,
she's probably about 50 or so.
Wow, first time in Israel, amazing.
Yeah, and look, I mean, for everybody, it's very interesting. I mean, and it really is. It's not nearly. It is emotional, kind of coming out of the closet, so to speak.
Right.
Able to speak about this openly, and for us to have formal presence of people on the ground, of me going out there 3 weeks ago, negotiating about opening our embassy in Abu. This is now UAE. I'm jumping from one to.
Yeah, sure.
But opening an embassy in UAE and opening a consulate general in Abu Dhabi and opening a consulate general in Dubai, and walking around and feeling the love and the warmth. And I had a dinner there, you know, COVID notwithstanding, but having a dinner there, about 10 of us around the table. This is like a United Nations dinner hosted by a very dear friend who's a senior businessman in Dubai, one of the most prominent business families there. He knows me, and I know him very, very well, quite a number of years in the diamond business, by the way. And sitting there on my right, I have an Iranian whose father is Lebanese, his mother is Italian. On my left, a Tunisian. Second to my right is a Libyan guy, another guy from Panama, another guy from another few people from UAE, of course. And the topic on the table, everybody's speaking about this openly, is about Israel. This is phenomenal, and this is we really, really dreamed of. And in my profession, this is what I work for, and you know, fortunately for me, I'm living to enjoy it. But really, this is what people in my profession live for and work for day in and day out.
Well, I want to ask you about two particular potential spanners in the work on this issue, which I want to understand. One is the reaction amongst the Palestinian leadership and particular countries in the Arab League that are very much supporting them still. Has there been a big kickback? Has COVID meant there's so many other issues going on that's been quite quiet? Is there potential of something flaring up, even possibly some kind of intifada type thing? What are your thoughts on this, or what's the temperature there with that?
Wow, we waited 20 minutes for this. I'm sure this will be question number one.
Yeah, well, no, you know, Hakawat Tov, we've done amazing things. You want to make this happen, but we have to be realists, right?
No, I'm only half joking.
Yeah, you wait for my next question, but go on. Yeah.
Or that'd be Iran, maybe. But I'll tell you what we're saying is first and foremost, these agreements, what we call the Abrahamic Accords now, that are being with other countries, with countries in the region, are not against anybody. They're not against the Palestinians. They're not against the Iranians. Okay, but if you're speaking about the Palestinians, what we've basically done here is we've kind of turned it on its head, or changed the paradigm, if you want. Countries for the past, and God knows how many decades already, have said, you know, nothing with Israel until we solve the Palestinians.
Right. I thought that was the official policy of the Arab League. No,
that wasn't, and officially it still is. If you apropos the Khartoum Convention from whenever that was, I think 67 or 68. I can't exactly remember which year. I'm sure there are people on the screen who remember better than me. Hey, wow! And we're forming relations with Khartoum now, right? So with the Palestinians. Look, when the first Emiratis came out here privately, some of the private businessmen who've come here after the normalization, they were spat at and had shoes thrown at them at Al-Aqsa when they visited. The Palestinians are calling them traitors, calling all the countries traitors. And by the way, there is an interesting shift, if you want. Look at what Morocco is doing and how they're dealing with it. It's interesting to look at them. But with the Palestinians, you know, I think it was Abba Evan who said at the time, he said it about the Arabs, not the Palestinians, but looking at the Palestinians, never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
Right.
But what we are seeing now, very, very carefully, is that there may be some kind of a shift also with the Palestinians. The mere fact that they are resuming talks with us, that they are now taking money that we're passing on to them, restrictions that we're putting on it, perhaps might show some kind of a shift. I'll be very, very careful with this, with my optimism. I normally am an optimist, but I'm very, very careful with that. I don't hope.
Do you think Biden might try and take advantage of that, or try and get involved through that angle, or?
Look, started with this whole thing with what we call the business of the deal of the century, right?
Yeah.
With this very early on, trying to get the Palestinians on board. The Palestinians wouldn't hear anything about this,
Right.
and then they went in other directions. The question with Biden, that's probably that was probably your next question, and about the.
Still got one coming. Go on.
And not shying away from it.
No, I'm teasing. Go on.
I don't know exactly what you mean about taking advantage of this, but
well, no, in a positive way. Like you might say to them, "Look, here's an opportunity. Like using the Arab League to hold out against Israel as a way of getting what you want is not working. Here's an opportunity to come together. Let's try and do something. It could lead possibly to something positive. I hope."
Potentially, you're right. Look, this is what more and more countries from the Middle East as well have been saying to the Palestinians. So, okay, the Palestinians wouldn't pick up the phone to, or wouldn't answer the phone to Trump or any of his people for the past 4 years. With Biden, they may see a different thing now. And yes, this is going to be the message that we understand it's going to the Palestinians. And by the way, I mean, from our end as well, we've always been saying to the Palestinians, don't, join this wagon. One of the things that I am looking at right now, also in my current position, is how do we get the Palestinians on board? How do we get the Jordanians and Egyptians on board? We haven't even spoken about them in the past 20 minutes, for instance. We've got peace for them. You mentioned Egypt. We've got peace for them for over 40 years. But this isn't the type of peace that we've managed to do within 3.5 months with the Emirates.
Really? Oh, I thought economics it's very limited economic partnership and
zero.
Really? I didn't know that.
Or very close to it. To be correct, very, very close to it. It's people consider it or nickname it. I don't like the term, but a cold peace. But look, I mean, on a strategic level, we have quiet borders with Jordan and with Egypt since the peace accords, which is something which is I can't take for granted. They are fighting terrorism. We're doing it together, fighting joint enemies, whether it's ISIS or Iran in either place. But there is no real what we call P2P, people-to-people relations. There's no tourism. There's no business. And this should be about.
Right, because the land connection, so it was that. So there's a very different issue with countries that aren't directly connected. Oh, I see. So you think that might, will this possibly make changes with Egypt then? I never even knew to ask that.
I think with Egypt, it's going to be more difficult. With Jordan, it could be a bit easier because Jordan, the business platform, if you want, is already there. And just to kind of, if I want to go into fantasy land for a moment, or all of us on a nice Motzei Shabbat, is to think about the region as a region and think about the connectivity. Think about connecting Israel through Jordan to through Saudi to the Gulf.
Right. That's the question out of the wider thing. So let me ask you one more question before I open up to other people. The internal issues within Israel, that's my second question. Will another election, potentially a new government, destabilize all this, or is it too powerful and large to matter who the government is? And in fact, if it isn't Bibi, might that make it easier to work with Palestinians and other issues as well?
So, as you all know, consensus in Israel is something which is near impossible.
Yes.
To reach, apart from criticism about whatever's going on.
Exactly. Consensus or no consensus.
But if there is a consensus on one thing, it's about the agreements and the relations with our new countries and our new friends and partners. And this really does go across the board, excluding for some obscure reason some of the Arab parties. By the way, some of the parties, but not the Arab Israelis. So again, we see that they don't necessarily represent the people that they were elected by. But there really is a consensus, and I don't see any change in this regard, regardless of who comes to power. The elections, look, I mean, elections in Israel were competing with Italy, I think, and maybe even overtaking them by now with the level of elections in the country.
Right.
Really, there is no change in this regard. And you know, with regards to the Palestinians, at the end of the day, I think they will have to come to terms with whoever it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it might be positive, absolutely. So we've got a few questions. I think Margaret wanted to ask first. Margaret, do you want to unmute? You have to do it yourself and ask your question.
First of all, Shavuot Tov, Eliav, and thank you for dedicating the session to my sister Alison, who is, thank God, doing well. And it's great to see you, Eliav. Baruch Rofeh Cholim, as they say, that's every time I see you. My question to you is, how about medical issues? Is there, I mean, I think that the Emirates and those places have their own wonderful hospitals, but with the exception of, what was his name, the Palestinian guy, Ekaret, who came to Israel to hospital to Hadassah and sadly died there. What is the medical situation like? I know that there's good borders with Lebanon and so up north with Syrian refugees and so on. What about with other countries in that area?
So thanks, Margaret. It's good seeing you as well. And hopefully soon also in person, you know, with the
hope so.
Vaccinations picking up everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, and this also connects me maybe to your question. For years, we've seen people from all over the Middle East coming very quietly for treatments in Israel. And doctors as well going, first of all, consulting over the phone and by video conferencing and so on, and also going out there, mainly to deal with leadership and, you know, the VIPs and whatever who are able to do it and also come under the radar. So there is already some kind of a platform to work on. There are already relationships and formal relationships going on between at least 3 hospitals that I'm aware of. I'm aware of because I was, you know, I'll say in all modesty, somewhat involved in making them happen, with mainly with the UAE and Bahrain, between Sheba Hospital with Professor Kreis in both countries, Hadassah with Zev Rothstein, and also Asaf Harofeh Hospital, who actually I think nearly a year ago at least started negotiations on something. I don't even know what the translation in English is. It's kind of a pressure cabin or something like that, which Asaf Harofeh world renowned for. So there's a lot of stuff going on. The medical situation in UAE, for instance, is really, really advanced. I mean, if I were to go there, and I went there, and part of the reason I felt comfortable going there and to Bahrain, for instance, is because I felt fairly comfortable with the situation there. Having said that, and here I do draw similarities on this issue as well. There are other issues as well, but I mean, in addition, but on the issue of medical facilities, for instance, UAE in particular, they want to shine. They want to be the most advanced technologically, the country that everybody looks at and comes to, and the most developed and most open, and so on and so forth. Bahrain as well to an extent, but we need to understand it's also a much smaller country and also it is more conservative, but they are very, very well educated and very worldly. Morocco in a different way also, but to an extent. But UAE, for instance, they have, and here I'm drawing similarities to Shanghai for that matter. They have state-of-the-art technologies, hospitals, and so on, but they don't necessarily have the real know-how of how to operate it in the best way that in Israel we know how to do. They don't have a similar system, and they do seek the cooperation also in this, in training, both how to operate some of the technologies, but also how to address the healthcare system. Not that Israel is the best in the world, but the Kupat Cholim system seems to be something. In the healthcare in the communities is something that I think we do have something to be proud of, with all of our criticism. And believe me, we have criticism, and the bureaucracy and everything else. But the social medical care that we have in Israel is something that quite a number of the countries are looking to learn from. And together, you know, I've got friends and colleagues who approach me and say, look, I want to come here and train doctors in the region as I don't know, a visiting in scholar surgeon or whatever it might be. We're talking about training nurses, something which, by the way, we've been doing in the region for the past at least 8 to 10 years. Again, kind of under the radar, with senior nurses as well, by the way. So these are type of the things that we are looking at and are focusing on, because really the sky is the limit with the levels of cooperation. But at the end of the day, we don't want to spread too thinly. And at least as governments, we do want to try and pinpoint some areas that are worth focusing more on.
Right. I've got a couple of questions about Iran, both in terms of the Jewish community and in general. So Robert Winston and Leo, they've asked you about the 20,000 Jews or more in Iran, and if anything can be achieved in that environment. And then second of all, if any attention is being paid politically to the Iranian policy of Khomeini, of like the idea of like world dominance, you know, the Shia prophecy and that kind of stuff. In other words, so basically internal Jews in Iran and externally the political relationship, are we leaving that aside for the moment, or is that a major issue being addressed?
So on the former, it's something which of course is very, very sensitive. And the alignment of Iranian Jewry, there's no way that anybody can be perceived as interfering in what's going on in Iran. Literally, their lives are at stake in many ways. We see from time to time all kinds of statements that come out from Iranian Jews, mostly kind of in favor of the Iranian regime and bad-mouthing Israel and the US. But you know, we need to take it with a grain of salt. We are, you know, we're looking at this very closely as a government, but you know, we're not interfering as much as we could if we would have relations, of course, and if it weren't considered one of very few enemy states. Which leads me on to the next issue of, you know, the external,
right,
and what's going on there with Khamenei, with other leaders, and maybe some of the different voices, and there are different voices in Iran. We are continuing, and we will continue with making a huge effort to make sure that Iran is isolated and is with its back against the wall until it changes its policy. Until it changes its policy on the nuclear program, until it changes its policy on what's going on in Syria and Lebanon, on terrorism, on directing missiles towards us, on threatening Israelis and Jews throughout the world. And we will continue this. And this is by the way, one of our challenges also with the incoming administration, but one of the things that we definitely do see eye to eye on every single aspect of it, together with our Gulf friends and allies. I hope.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one. And I've got a couple of questions from Ben Tobin who wants to ask. Who's next? Ben, do you want to ask? Do you want to unmute?
Okay. Hi, Eliav. Two things. Firstly, you referred to things changing. A couple of things 3.5 months ago. Was there anything specific, or was it just things came together?
So I use the term kind of the stars coming aligned. I was part of a team, kind of an interagency team that for the past 9 months or so, been working quite extensively, mainly with the Emiratis on issues that, if you look back at the joint statement that came out by 3 leaders in, I think it was August 13th, if I'm not mistaken, the joint statement talking about the relations, they had a lot of substance that was in it, talking about cooperation on technological stuff, COVID issues, flight, consular stuff. These are things that I've been working on and kind of came to a crescendo perhaps about 3 months ago, and people felt that this was kind of the right time. And maybe this is kind of the catalyst in a way. Together with, you know, they had to come to, you know, everybody had to come to terms and to understand, yes, this was the right time. Everybody kind of wanted to make sure that that they had all the setting right. that they feel they had the people behind them, that the leadership, and we need to remember that UAE, for instance, it's 7 different emirates. So we have one family controlling Abu Dhabi, another family controlling Dubai, another one with Ras Al Khaimah, Sharjah, and so on. So they also had to agree on some of these things. And maybe also understanding or considering that that they're losing time, that they're losing out on this for different reasons. And I assume also, and this I really don't know to say, some kind of an agreement, or at least a quiet one, between some of them about who would go first and how they would go about it.
You got a second question, Ben? Or?
Yes, I do. So there is a perception that perhaps post 67, Israel missed some opportunities to act as a benevolent occupier, if that's not an emotive term. Is there an opportunity now for you to encourage our new friends to spread the benefit of their relationship with you into the Palestinian territories, so that Palestinians feel that they're getting something out of this too? So encouraging Emirati businessmen to invest and to start relationships there. And are you encouraging that?
Okay, so I mentioned earlier a Palestinian fatigue, and this kind of, in a way, I think is part of it. Hardly any of the conversations that I've been holding over the years has the Palestinian issue taken I would say, a prominent place on the agenda. And I'll say this diplomatically. Okay, I do need to justify my my title or profession. Having said that, there is an interest, and we are seeing this, of these countries kind of saying to the Palestinians, enough is enough. You're missing out. Join the wagon. Stop complaining. Stop, bitching about your situation. We've had enough of this, and this is why we're moving on. This is an opportunity for you as well. Now, will this happen in the near foreseeable future with the current Palestinian leadership? I don't know. Ein navi be'iro, as they say. It's up to the Palestinians, but I will say the Palestinians absolutely understand and realize now more than ever before that they are missing out, and they are sensing that they have the carpet kind of pulled under their legs now, under their feet, so to speak, and they are kind of scrambling. And if you ask me, and somebody asked about Biden, perhaps yes. I think this is Rafi. Perhaps yes, they are also looking at Biden as an opportunity to kind of climb down the ladder, in a way, to get back to the table.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. So I'm just conscious of the time. I'm just conscious of the time, but we've got time for one more question. I think Evelyn raised her hand. Evelyn, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Well, it's actually me, Rafi.
Oh, Larry. So, okay.
Yeah, that's
even better. Go on.
Well, not even better. Evelyn's saying next week, but
even better because I'm sure she prompted you. No, carry on.
Thank you for that, Rabbi. Anyway, you alluded to the new administration coming in on January the 20th at noon, notwithstanding the tirades of the incumbent. And one thing that Biden has said, he wants to rejoin 2 international agreements. One, the Paris Climate Accords, and the other, of course, is the JCPOA. So when you sit down with your colleagues on the other side of the desk in the State Department, what arguments would you use to try to persuade them not to rejoin the JCPOA?
Why are you talking about the climate change issue? It's also important, but
no, it is, because climate change, unless you believe the Earth is flat, all right, you wouldn't have an argument not to rejoin Paris. Yeah, so let's leave that to the side. I think it's great that the U.S. will rejoin Paris, but I'm interested in the Iranian issue.
Okay, on the JCPOA, as you can imagine, also over the past 4 years, we are continuing to discuss this issue, not just with one side of the aisle, but with both sides of the aisle. And of course, even more so now after the elections and towards the swearing in and of course thereafter. And these are discussions that is, you know, fortunately enough, it's not just the Israelis who are holding and who have an interest in this. And it's not just Republicans in the US, but also elements within the incoming administration who are in favor of having a much stronger approach towards Iran, as we have seen now. And Biden himself is not necessarily, from what I understand, I don't deal with the US policy as much as I did, I don't know, 6 years ago. But Biden himself seems to be not of exactly the same approach as his as the former president of the United States when it comes to Iran, and there is a lot to be discussed with him. I'm not overly concerned. You know, one can talk about different approaches to how we deal with the Iranians. I won't throw ideas of having a new JCPOA on the table, which would include a much broader issue and much, you know, harsher sanctions and so on, as a possibility. And I don't think that the Biden, from what I understand so far, is talking about going back to the original JCPOA as it was. So, you know, time will tell. It's definitely one of the big issues on the table. But I think it's something that we can see eye to eye and work on together.
Thank you, Eddie. I've got one final question that I wanted to ask, but Mark Israel was also mentioning it. He's just mentioning that he's just come back from the UAE and was so happy at how friendly people were to him and knowing he was Jewish and so on. But he wanted to ask, and I did as well, about Saudi Arabia, because that's the big one. You know, Bahrain and UAE were conscious of it. You know, people have been flying over Saudi territory to get there. Is that's the really big one? Is that potentially round the corner? Is there potential there? Are we being nervous about it, or in terms of increasing our relations and normalizing them and joining the Abraham Accords? Is that a possibility in the next few months, or?
I don't know whether nervous is the word I would use about it. And look, when we say Abrahamic Accords, and actually, you know, plays well into this week's parasha, if you want to, there was Yaakov giving the blessings, but we do see it also as kind of a blessing to everybody in the region, if you want. It's an opportunity, it's out there, it's on the table. I'm not a betting man. I've never been to Las Vegas. The closest I've probably been is Dubai.
It's pretty close.
And I think we need to take it into proportion. I don't know whether proportion is the right term, but look, we've seen something amazing happening over the past 3.5 months. Okay. In a phenomenal time, relations with 4 countries, basically. It's kind of still kind of out there somewhere. And Morocco, by the way, I'm sending out a team on Monday to start looking for an office and residence.
Fantastic.
Saudi are slow. Saudi are very conservative, with a big C and a small c. We need to remember that they're the ones behind the Arab initiative, PRP initiative. They have a very, very strong role in the Arab world and within the Arab League. We have a conservative leadership there, different from the second generation, and it's the leadership that still is calling the shots. I would encourage us to look at the full half glass, like I tend to do on my personal life as well, by the way, and look at the silver lining and where we are at now compared to where we were. The fact that UAE and Bahrain signed agreements with us would not have happened without the agreement or consent, or I don't know, turn of a blind eye, if you want.
Right.
From the Saudis wouldn't have taken place. The overflights to the Gulf right now, flying. I mean, I can send you photos afterwards. You know, you can't really see the camels or the Mercs down below, but you can see the desert of Saudi from the window. it's something, you know, we could have only have dreamed of 3.5 months ago. So le'at, and we'll get there as well, even if it isn't next week or next month. It'll happen too.
Right. Well, look, Eliav, thank you so much. It's reassuring to hear you and explain the stories and the personal aspects of it. And, you know, the policy of finding opportunities as opposed to working on the negative. You know, Rav Kook always said, quoting the Pasuk, you know, Sumera ba'asei tov, you know, instead of fighting the bad, increase the good opportunities. And we have to do those. And we wish you and the Bureau and the ministry much hatzlacha in this issue. And, you know, for all of us, you know, we pray Sim Shalom every day, and it means something. You know, we hope that these things will happen and it will increase and lead to more peace and prosperity, but also understanding, and hopefully an understanding with the Palestinians as well. So thank you so much, Eliav, for sharing, for giving us your time on a Motzei Shabbos. May be healthy. And we look for more exciting news from Israel on a daily basis. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. And Shavua Tov, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Shavua Tov.
Thank you.
Shavua Tov, everybody. Well done. Thank you so much.
Good job. Thank you very much.
And thank